Hello there! What is going on, everyone? Today we are going to be teaching you how to play Star Wars Shatterpoint. This is going to be an overview of the rules and a get you started type of video. So if you like what you see here, there's plenty more. Hopefully you will stick around and join us for lots more Star Wars tabletop gaming discussion. If you want the full rules, they are going to be available down in the video link description, so you can learn more about Star Wars Shatterpoint, which is launching on June 2nd. We also are doing a giveaway for a Star Wars Shatterpoint core set. There's a few days left still to enter to win that. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. And if you don't win, don't worry, we do giveaways all the time. So I'd love to have you stick around and join our Discord, social media links, all that stuff in the video description below. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and look at Star Wars Shatterpoint, just the core set. We're only going to be using things from the core set to teach you how to play, but there are lots more expansions available. So if you like what you see here and you want to learn more, stick around because we've got a lot to talk about. Let's talk about how to play. So the first thing you're going to want to do when you're going to play Star Wars Shatterpoint is establish who's playing what. Yeah, you're going to build out your strike teams and also set up the battlefield. Now this game is played on a 3x3 play surface. I'm using a 3x3 play mat here. But outside of the play mat, everything you see here is included in the core set. So we've got all of the terrain kind of set up on the battlefield. And I've also went ahead and assigned objective markers. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Your two strike teams that build up your entire squad are going to consist of a primary, a secondary, and a support. And so we're going to have Anakin, Rex, and the 501st be one strike team, whereas Ahsoka, Bo-Katan, and the Clan Kryze Mandalorians are going to be the other strike team. And we're just going to go with heroes versus villains for our typical little demo here for how to play. After determining who's going to be playing first, you'll be also determining the mission. Now, we have just the one mission for the core set, and that's going to be shifting priorities. And this is going to be how our objectives work and how we go about winning struggles and winning the game. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up our 9 objective tokens on the board. We're going to measure them out using the range 4 and range 5 tools to get the appropriate distance. And we're going to set them all with their inactive side facing up. Well, this would be the active side, but once we start the game, we'll be flipping some of these over. I always think it's a good idea to try to fit it to where some of them can go on top of terrain as well, so this way we can be fighting on top of certain pieces of terrain, but not all of them have to be on terrain. So you want a little mixture of some on the ground and some on top of some of the terrain. We also want to make sure we have enough force to start our game. Our Will of the Force tokens here are very much like command tokens in that they are going to allow us to use certain abilities. But before we look at all of Anakin Skywalker's abilities, we're going to flip him over and look at the other side of his card here. He's going to have 7 squad points. That allows him to take Rex and the 501st, because each of those guys have their own amount of squads, where Rex will be 4 and the 501st will be 3. That's going to allow him to take those guys. He's also going to have 4 force points, and then we combine that with Ahsoka's 3. Our 2 primaries are going to give us those Will of the Force points, so that means my team is going to have 7. Additional information here is going to be his name, as well as whether he's a primary, secondary, or support. And then, of course, we flip him over. And then this is going to detail certain abilities that he can use. He can force jump. He can say, I'm going to end this. Notice there's little force symbols next to these. When there's a force symbol next to an active ability or a reactive ability like that, it's going to indicate how many force tokens you have to flip over in order to use those. Once you flip these over, they are spent and you can't use them again until you run out of cards. More on that in just a little bit. But he also has some that won't cost force, unless of course he gets injured. More on that later. These are his different abilities, but also he is going to have his stance card. Now, primaries have a double-sided stance card, where secondaries do not. So all secondaries and supports will only have their one stance card, where primaries will have a double-sided that they can flip over once during their activation. More on this when we get into combat. I want to touch on some of the different tools that are included. We've got different range tools here, range 5, 4, 3, and 2. These are going to give us different ranges for different abilities. A figure is said to be within range 5 from another character if any part of this can touch that character's base. So they don't have to be totally inside, whereas sometimes within means fully within. Within just means to be that this can touch. So my finger is technically within range 5 right now because it just barely can touch my finger. And that's true for all ranges. There's also a range 1, and that is the width of any of these tools, which is actually 1 inch, whereas the length is for range 2 is 3 inches, then 6 inches, then I believe 8 inches and 10 inches as the respective ranges. There is also a shove tool. This one is diagonal, but is actually used only to measure the 1 inch shove distance that you will use on certain abilities, and it's angled like so it can get into nooks and crannies without having to knock over terrain or miniatures. We have an advanced tool. Now this is a longer range movement tool. And then we also have a dash tool. Now this is a shorter range movement tool. This is used for a lot of shorter range movements, including things like jumps and climbs as well. We're going to see more of this when we talk about actions. Another important and very, very important piece is the struggle tracker. Now the struggle tracker represents the battle between forces, or possibly good and evil depending on your builds, or maybe different ideologies or different methodologies as applies to the battlefield. In other words, you versus your opponent, because you're always fighting over something, and this represents how you're going to be doing that fighting. Now, there's going to be a clear cube that's going to start in the middle, and as you claim objectives and earn points, this will get pulled to one side or another. But there are also a number of black cubes, and these are going to be called momentum cubes. So when certain criteria are met, you will gain momentum cubes on your side. I might have a couple on this side, and maybe the other player gets 1 or 2 there. And basically, they help you win the struggle because you have to pull this farther and farther. This is kind of like a tug of war. On each player's turn, they're going to have the opportunity to score points and pull this momentum, or pull the struggler closer to their momentum. Now, basically the game is won when somebody wins 3 of these struggles, and to win a struggle, you have to pull this so far that it would overlap one of your momentum tokens. And there's lots of different ways to get those. You can gain these by injuring an enemy character. You can also gain a momentum token if maybe this is my opponent's side, I pull it back a little bit, but it's still on their side. So I've gained a little bit of progress, but not enough to put me past the 0 point. When that happens, I'm going to gain a momentum. Also, after the first turn, so it turns 2 through infinity. If it ever gets pulled and it lands right on the 0, both sides are going to gain a momentum, and that kind of acts also as a timer, because the game cannot go on forever. We have different mission cards, different phases for our struggle, and for our first phase of the struggle, there's going to be 3 different cards. What we're going to do is we're going to create a mission deck. We'll take 1 from the phase 1s, 1 from the phase 2s, and 1 from the phase 3s, and we'll discard all the rest, but we're not going to look at them. We're going to kind of randomize those, and so we'll do something kind of like this, set these aside face down, put the rest back in the box. They won't be used for this game. This is going to basically outline which of our different tokens that we've deployed will flip over, and that will happen after we deploy. So after you roll dice to determine who is going to go first, you'll start deploying. So first player will deploy first, and the rules for deploying is you're going to take your primary character. In this case, I'm going to choose to go with the Ahsoka team first, and you'll deploy anywhere within range 2 of your board edge. Now again, remember, range 2 or within doesn't mean they have to be fully within. I can go as far out as that from the board edge because she is still touching the range 2. And maybe I want her kind of right in the center, or maybe I want her a little bit farther over to the left. We're going to see, I'll go kind of about right there. This way we have a room to some different terrain over there as well. After I deploy my primary, I'm going to also deploy my secondary and supports from that same strike team, and they have to be range 1 of the primary character. Now I'm going to go kind of a little farther on that guy and a little bit farther back right there, and they're all deployed within range 1 of Ahsoka, and now I'm done. And that's going to make setup a lot faster in this game than you probably were expecting, because now all of a sudden half of my entire team is already deployed. Next, it's time for your opposing player to go ahead and deploy one of their strike teams, and you will just go back and forth until all are deployed, and now you are ready to start the game. After we're all deployed, I'm going to reveal the number 1 card for our mission tracker, and that is going to be locate the asset. So now we know which of the 9 objective tokens are going to flip over, and these are going to be our active objective tokens. These are the points that we're going to be fighting over for the first third of the game. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start flipping those over. Boop. I'm not going to get this one, but I'll get this one over here. Boop. You don't have to make the boop sound, but it's always a fun thing to do, and I'll keep doing that until I get all of them. So after we have set everything up, I'm going to make sure I have all of my cards here too. These are going to be my Shatterpoint cards. These represent 1 card from every single unit that's in my game, plus 1 Shatterpoint card. We've shuffled these. I'm going to go ahead and pull, and my first card is going to be Anakin Skywalker. That means I have to activate Anakin Skywalker, and if I don't want to do that, I have one option. Now, I have no cards in reserve, so I can put a card in reserve if I don't have a card in reserve. So in this case, since maybe I don't want to activate Anakin first, maybe I want to save him until a little bit later, I will go ahead and spend 1 force. I'll flip that. So I'm going to spend a force, flip it over, boom. And now I'm going to put Anakin in reserve. Now that I have him in reserve, I get to draw again. Now, since I already have a card in reserve, if I draw again, whatever I pull, I have to play. In this case, I'm going to pull, well, it's Ahsoka, so now I have to play Ahsoka. If I wanted to play the card in reserve, I would have to declare that before I draw. That would free up my reserve and then give me some extra flexibility. But I've pulled Ahsoka, so we're going to have to activate Ahsoka Tano. All right, so here I've got Ahsoka. Now, the 2 most common actions that people will typically do are movement and combat actions. A move can be one of various different types. I can use the advance, which is going to be very common. It's my long distance move. I can use this if I'm not engaged in melee with someone else. And to be engaged in melee, I'd have to be distance 2 of an enemy character. The other types of movements I can do is I can dash using the shorter tool. I can also climb, which would use the shorter tool and also gets me out of my current elevation. I could go to any other elevation if I could climb. I also cannot climb if I'm engaged with an enemy character. But outside of movement, we can also do a combat action. That can be a melee attack or a ranged attack. If I'm going to do something like that, I have to reference their stance card. For example, Ahsoka does have melee dice. She has 7 dice for melee, but she has no dice for range, and also no distance for range. So she has no ranged weapons, so she can only do melee attacks. So she wants to be close, up close and personal. I can also flip her card also once during her activation to her other side if she wanted something more offensive versus something more defensive. I can only do that once during her activation. I can also use an ability on Ahsoka Tano's card if she has an active ability. In this case, she does. She has force speed. Of course, this will cost a force for me to trigger. But this allows her to do that symbol, which is advance. There's a handy-dandy section in the rulebook that talks about all these different symbols and what they do and what they mean, because they are going to be referenced a lot on these cards. But why this is important is because you can only take any given action once during your turn, unless it otherwise says so. So while she can only advance once, if she wanted to use force speed, she could then use this tool twice, because she'd be doing the move action and then an ability action. She can also recover, which would heal either herself or somebody else within distance 2, or get rid of a negative effect token. There are all kinds of different status effect tokens that are going to put negative, nasty little debuffs on your characters. And she can also take cover. Take cover is a way for her to kind of dive to the ground or kind of hide behind a tuft of grass or a nearby piece of terrain. It's going to give her a cover token and allow her to move distance 1, which is just that 1 inch, which is very, very short, but it's more of a defensive posture. Characters are going to probably be moving a lot at the beginning of the game and taking combat actions at the near beginning of the game once they're in range of enemy characters. So for this, let's say Ahsoka wanted to advance. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the curved edge of this tool and I'm going to line it up next to her base. I can bend this tool if I want. I can move her however I want. And then I can place her anywhere touching the tool. So it's a lot of flexibility there. I can place her anywhere touching the tool. She must end on the same or lower elevation, because I could, in theory, get her, it's from a top-down perspective, so I could, in theory, reach the terrain, but because I'm not jumping, I don't have a jetpack or forced jump on Ahsoka, I can't end on higher elevation by doing that. I could try to climb, but I might not reach if I were to climb. Let's look at it from a top-down perspective so I can show you how a climb would be interesting here. So here you can see if I were to use a climb and I was just going the short range distance, I might sort of be on here, but I'd be overlapping. You're not really allowed to overlap the terrain, so I'd have to be fully on there. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how egress points work, and one of the really cool things about the ladders and other types of climbable things called egress points. So Ahsoka will move here to this ladder. Now what happens when you complete a move action and you are within distance 1, so that 1 inch of a ladder, and we can measure this using the width of any tool or the shove tool if we want. You then get to automatically climb up for free and then put yourself within distance 1 of the top of the egress point. So when I take Ahsoka up, I can put her anywhere within 1 inch of the ladder's top, the egress point. I could set her over here if I wanted her maybe to be able to jump off later. But what I want to do is I want her as close as she can to this objective point. This is an active objective point, so I'm going to put her right there. Now what that does for me is that is going to potentially put her within range 2 of this objective point, and that will give her control, and that's a very important thing. For her second action, she might just take cover, moving an extra inch closer and getting her a hunker token, and she is just going to hold that objective for right now. So at the end of her activation, I'm going to check all of the objectives on the board. Of course, she's the only one because she's the only one I've moved out, and see if I have control. So I can see that I don't have any other objectives over there. So what I'll do is I'm going to mark this one. Now I have control of one objective, and that's going to gain me 1 point. And at the end of my turn, having gained 1 point, I will pull the struggle marker 1 point closer to my side. If I had 2 or 3 points, I would have pulled it that many more closer to my side. I then take the Ahsoka card, I set it in my discard pile, and allow my opponent to begin their turn. And we will keep going until all of these cards have been spent. And we'll talk about more what happens after that. We'll simulate that I have now decided to go with Anakin Skywalker, and I pulled some more. Oh, and I pull a Shatterpoint card. Now the Shatterpoint card, it allows me to activate any unit on the battlefield of my units. And what it also allows me to do is allows me to activate somebody who is already activated. So this is my ticket for somebody to activate twice in a turn. Now, unlike normal cards, if I have nobody in reserve, I cannot put the Shatterpoint card in reserve. But what I can do is I can still spend a force, and instead of putting it into reserve, I can shuffle it back into my deck. So this way I'm less likely to get it again. And then, but again, I guess you always can get it again, right? Terrible shuffle, but that's the risk you take. So when I've activated everyone and everybody comes, important thing, certain characters have this little plus symbol on here, and that is a reminder that they have a special ability, like Rex here. Get a move on, soldier. At the start of this unit's activation, at the start. So when you pull this card, there's something you need to do before you start taking actions, right? And in his case, he's going to choose another character in this unit, which would be him, right? Choose a character in this unit. He is a character in his own unit. Every miniature is a character. The unit is all the characters represented by the card. This is only really relevant for units like the 501st, which have 2 minis per, or the Clan Kreese Mandalorians that have 2 minis per. But he'll let another allied Galactic Republic character, and he'll let them dash, and they can also gain a hunker token. This is where we reference the bottom of these people. Oh, Galactic Republic. Wait a second, are clone troopers also in the Galactic Republic? You bet your butt they are. They sure are. But are the Clan Kreese Mandalorians in the Galactic Republic? Oh, they are not. So this is how you start to see why synergy is important when you're creating builds, because now I'm thinking maybe I want to buy that Obi-Wan Kenobi expansion because he's got some new clones too. He's got, I can now have like even greater flexibility and synergy within my build. So that's something to think about. But when all of these cards are gone, As soon as the last one's gone, I'm going to shuffle them, and I'm going to create a new deck, and we'll reshuffle, and then I will refresh all of my Will of the Force tokens. So now I've got all of these back. So they have to last me. So I don't want to spend too many Force abilities right away. Okay, so we're going to fast forward a little bit into a mid-game state where maybe some of the Mandalorian super commandos and Maul have come up and they've taken control of some of these points, and I've got Bo-Katan and the Clan Kryze Mandalorians using their jetpack to jump up onto some of the terrain a little bit more easily than other units can navigate terrain over here. But I want to do a couple of interesting things with them. I wanted to show you guys how a combat action would work. Now, first thing to consider, let's say I pull the Clan Kryze Mandalorians and I activate them and they want to do an action. Now, every time they do an action, both characters in the unit will take the action independently of each other if they can. I want to have them, for example, both move, so they would have each moved. And let's say now I want them to shoot. In this case, let's say they were already there. I'll have their first action be to focus. Focus is one of those actions that you can take that gives you an extra die when you attack next time, which is a really nice thing. And it'll also work nice with their sharpshooter ability. If they do a ranged attack with a focus, they're going to have even an extra die on top of that for the sharpshooter 1, which is nice. It gives them 1 extra die for a ranged attack when they have focus. But it won't apply to a melee attack. So in this case, they want to attack those Clan Kryze Mandalorians, and I'm going to start with this first Clan Kryze Mandalorian. It's going to be attacking the Mandalorian Super Commando right here, and we're going to have to reference their cards. Now, what we're going to also notice is that we're within range 2, which means they're in melee range. So this particular Mando actually won't be able to use a ranged attack. So if we look at their card here, we're going to see their ranged attack. They have range 4, would be 6 dice. They would kind of prefer to ranged attack, especially with a focus action and sharpshooter, which would give them 2 extra dice. They're going to only be able to melee, which is 5 dice. They still have the focus, so still 1 extra die, but they would have more dice if they could ranged attack. So they kind of prefer to shoot, but they're going to have to throw some fisticuffs with this particular attack. So right here, this is going to tell us how many dice we're going to roll. So this will be 5. We'll add 1 because we had taken a focus action. If we were defending, this is how many defense dice we would roll. All right, so we'll just give a quick combat example right now. So we're going to do a melee attack for our close Mando. Now he has 5 dice. He's going to get 1 extra, so we're going to roll 6 dice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that's right. Add it up really quick. Let's do a live roll here. We got, oh wow, that's a terrible roll. So we got a couple of different symbols. We'll talk about the different symbols in the dice. I'm gonna, well, all right, so this first symbol here is a miss. These are terrible. This means I've totally failed. They're not blank dice. There are no blanks, but they're kind of like blanks, and they're referenced by certain symbols in the game, especially like deflect. Ahsoka has a deflect ability where if somebody misses her, she can deflect it back at them. So these won't be anything, and these are considered strikes. So these count as successes. While this isn't actually a hit that does damage directly, it is considered a success. We call it a strike here. This is called an expertise, and it's going to reference the expertise that we have for our melee. So if we have 1 or 2 expertise, that will be considered a single strike. If we had 3 expertises, that would give us 2 criticals. Oh yes, there's also a critical. So just for sake of argument, let's say I rolled 1 critical. This counts as a strike that cannot be canceled by block results. What are block results? Let's find out, because I'll say I rolled this. So 1 critical, 2 strikes, and 1 expertise, which translates to 1 strike. So what I can do is I can just kind of turn that to a strike based on that. Now my defender in melee gets 5 dice, and so I will just basically the symbols here. We have misses also. We also have blocks. These will cancel strikes. And we have defensive expertise, which will reference the Beskar armor or whatever the defensive expertise is on him. Now let's see how well he did here. Oh, not too bad. So we do have a miss, so that's going to do nothing. We have 2 blocks, and then we have 2 on the Beskar armor, which equates to 2 blocks. And then here, since we had 2 defensive expertise, that's going to give us 2 more blocks. So that's be 4 blocks. Now what that would do here is that would cancel 1, 2, 3, and 4, but since this is a critical, it can't be canceled. So I'm going to end up with 1 success, and that is going to, it's not a very good attack, honestly. I should have probably rehearsed this a little bit more, but that's okay. This is what happens, you know. So with only 1 success, I'm then going to take a look at my chart here, and if I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 successes, I could have, you know, said, well, I'm going to do this, 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 and this, or 1, 2, 3, 4, and that. Basically, I start from the left, and I can work my way over. These guys have 2 different starting points. I can give my opponent a negative condition called pinned, which will stop them on their next move and do a damage, or I can shove them and do a damage. If I had a second success, I could shove them a second time and do 2 damage. So 2 successes is really good, because at least I get to do 3 damage for only 2 successes going through. Here for my third success, I could either break their weapon or make them defend a little bit weaker, and then I could shove them again and then do another damage and then do 2 more damage. So if I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 successes, that would be best. That would give me a lot of shoving potential. And any more than 5 successes would get discarded. So it doesn't, you don't want to have too many dice because they're going to be kind of wasted. But this is how the combat trees work. Different characters have different combat trees. If these guys were attacking, they would always start with the damage, and then you choose what kind of negative abilities you want to give. And there are all kinds of really interesting symbols that are on different trees. A lot of them are negative effects to your opponent. Some of them are good effects, like this one is jump. This is going to allow you to jump away mid-fight, and you do them all in order from left to right, depending on which track you've chosen. This is not an XP chart, so this does not continue from like turn to turn. This is just this one shot. How far did I get with this one attack? And then it's completely reset the next time you activate or attack. So in this case, what we would do is we would say that we shoved him back and then did 1 damage. So I would take 1 damage and put it on the unit card, and then we'll get this shove tool and push him back a little bit. So what I'll do, I'm going to reach around. I like to just, this is the nice thing about the shove tool. I can be like, boom, I just pushed you off. Now, these particular guys have a lot of shoves in their damage trees, and so they can potentially push you off so much that you go off of the obstacle, which is pretty cool, and it allows them to be great objective pushers or defenders that keep people off of the objectives. We're not done yet, though, because there is a second Mandalorian up here with the high ground going to be shooting down. Now, a cool thing about shooting down is that the defender never has cover. Whereas normally if there's a terrain piece within one and you're drawing a line goes through it, they're going to have cover for that, which means they roll 1 extra die. If you have hunker tokens, I talked about these before, these improve your cover by 1, so you're going to have an extra die per hunker token. But you can also get an extra cover for having terrain in between you and the attacker. Now this also does apply if you're both on the same piece of scaffolding. If you're on the same piece of terrain, shooting at each other, and you're beyond melee range, that same piece of terrain would give you cover if you were shooting these two. But since she is above, shooting downward, the defender is not going to have cover, which is really good for the attacker. That also means you're always going to have cover if somebody from below you is shooting up. So she is going to shoot at this guy, and she's going to have a lot of advantage here because not only does she have a focus, but she has sharpshooter, so she's going to get 2 extra dice instead of just 1 extra die, and the defender will not have cover. All right, so we're going to check to make sure that they're in range 4. We'll use the range 4 tool, and they're just in range of that. Of course, we use top down. We're also going to see how many dice we would gather. We'd gather 6 dice. I'll add 2 because of sharpshooter 1 and that they focused. So we're going to start with 8 dice here, and let's see what we roll. All right, so we rolled 1 miss, little movie magic there, 2 hits, a critical, and 4. Whoops, I'm knocking that over. 4 of our expertise. Referencing our expertise chart, that is going to get us a critical and a hit. So I'm just going to go ahead and convert those right now. A critical and a hit. I'll pull that away. So we're ended up with 2 criticals and 3 strikes. So that's a lot better. Now, one thing we also want to reference is our ranged defense on the other Mandalorian is only 4 instead of 5. So I'll roll less dice here. And we got 1 miss, 1 of those, and then 2, which is going to turn into 1, 2, 3. So, and of course I referenced the 2 on the Beskar armor chart. So that gives us 3 blocks. We'll cancel the 3 hits and we'll have 2 successes this time. And that is going to translate into another push or another shove or a pinned condition and a shove, and then 3 damage. So 1, 2, 3. So I'll start it this way and go down that way, as opposed to this way and that way like we did on the other one. That's going to take my 2 successes and turn it into 3 more damage. I'll take 3 more damage tokens and put those over here. Let's talk about what happened if he got up to his 8 damage. So let's just say I had 7 damage on the Mandalorian Super Commandos, and then I was able to do an attack that put 1 more damage on there and got them up to that 8 damage threshold. Well, as soon as they get that 8th damage, they are now going to be wounded, which means I'm going to put a wounded token on them. Now, the wounded tokens are double-sided, just so in case you're looking through yours, you have an injured side and a wounded side. So I'm going to put the wounded side on them. That means they are down and out. They are not going to count for contesting objective tokens. They're not going to count for tying up somebody else in melee. Also, I've wounded an enemy character, so now I would take my side and I would add an extra momentum to it, because wounding enemy characters is a good thing. So once they're wounded, the next time I would activate them, I then remove 1 of the negative condition tokens, whatever one it might be. In this case, it was going to be these. I'm going to go over these in just a minute. But I'll remove 1 of my negative condition tokens and all of my damage tokens, and then flip them over to injured. Now they're injured. They can now contest and fight again like new, except, they have a maximum capacity for being injured. They can start taking more damage now. They can start attacking injured characters. A couple of things happen when you're injured. Anytime I want to use an active ability, like this jetpack here, I'm going to increase the cost of how much force I'd have to pay. So this would normally cost me 1 force. Every injured token I have increases the cost of those active abilities. Also increases the cost of reactive abilities. Yes, even reactive abilities that were free now will cost +1 more force. That's kind of problematic. So that's going to add up. So when you do damage to characters, even though they're hard to kill, hard to have them completely removed from the game, injuring characters is significant, because it really limits how much your opponent can use their Will of the Force tokens to activate and use special abilities. And with certain characters, these abilities are way more important than others. Like being able to jump is cool, but it might not be game breaking. But on certain other characters like Anakin Skywalker's and Ahsoka Tano's, and some of those abilities are kind of game breaking. So making those more expensive is critically important. But I can start taking more damage, and if I were to get wounded again, now I'm wounded again. Now what happens here? Well, once I've got my second wound, I've got a threshold of 2, right? I'm going to treat it just like I would be wounded again. This another momentum token and any other things that trigger off of being wounded. When I activate this character, the next time I'm going to do the same thing. Remove 1 status token, all damage tokens, flip this over to the injured side. Now, when I have injured tokens equal to my injured capacity here, my stamina, once that equals, this is my last activation with that character. So I get 1 last triumphant attempt to do something. And at the end of this activation, I pick them up, remove them from the board. They are no more. So there are 4 different types of negative conditions you're going to find in the core set. These are usually inflicted by different characters' combat trees. I'm going to talk about each one of them briefly. The strained token is kind of like a delayed damage. The next time you move or attack or use an active or reactive ability, it's going to do 3 damage to that character immediately, and then you will lose the strained condition. It'll go away after that. These are also double-sided. Strained and exposed are on the same one, and then pinned and disarmed are on the same one. So speaking of exposed, it says when defending characters in this unit cannot use defensive expertise. Those are the diamonds, right? These are these. So next time you defend, all of these dice that you roll just get removed from the pool immediately. You don't even resolve them. Then this goes away. Disarmed is kind of like the exact same thing, but it's for offensive dice. You won't be able to use your diamonds, your expertise, and you know, you're going to roll quite a bit of those. You know, there's 2 of them on each of those dice, right? So that's nasty. It means that your attack is going to be significantly weaker. You'll immediately remove those dice and then remove that token. We also have pinned. This one is also kind of nasty. The next character that the next time they're trying to move, they're not going to move. That includes advancing, dashing, climbing, or jumping. They're not going to be able to move. So that is pretty cool. There are some movement types, like a relocation type movement that might be in a combat tree that could still potentially happen. But basically, this kind of keeps them put a little bit longer. They would then just go ahead and try to move, get rid of this, and then they wouldn't be able to move because they already taken a move action. So what you probably want to do is you would want to heal. So you remove this condition and then do your move and advance. But yeah, that's what these negative effects do. So let's just say at the end of my turn, I scored 2 points and went 1, 2, and then overlapped. That would mean that I win the struggle. And I want to talk about what happens when we win a struggle, because that is, you know, you got to win, you know, best 2 out of 3 struggles. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to reset that to 0. I'm going to clear off all the momentum, kind of start over. But only this board starts over, right? Everything else, you know, keeps the characters keep their conditions and their wounds and all of that good stuff. But we're also going to do some cool stuff with the mission cards. So we're going to go ahead and start resetting all of our objective tokens back to the black side. We're going to remove any of these, whether the bad guys or the good guys had control. The control goes away because, like, normally you would take control and you maintain control. You don't have to sit there and babysit it. Once you got it, it stays yours until somebody else comes and they have more people on there than you do. And so that's a kind of a cool thing about control on these things. You can kind of take it and then move on. Or you can sit somebody on there so that they have to have 2 people come over and try to do that. But you're going to reset all of these. All right, so after we've reset all of those, we're going to then go to our turn 2 struggle, or our second struggle card. We're going to flip that over. And there's going to be a top half and a bottom half. All right, so this one is so much for the element of surprise. Now this is going to show the 2 options. Now the player who won the first struggle is not going to choose. The other player gets to look at these and say, well, which one of these is going to be most advantageous for me? Like if it's in this case the evil side player, and he's like, well, I've got a Saj Ventress over there on that one, so that would mean I would have that one. I don't want it to be this bottom side because Rex and Anakin are down here on the bottom side. So you got to look at the map and say, well, which one's am I going to control right away? Which one's going to give me the advantage? So this is kind of a catch-up mechanic. So it's going to favor the second player typically. And so now, if you'll notice, like in this case, none of the middle ones are active. So all that fighting over the middle is now pointless. What are these guys going to do? Oh no, do they stay there and keep pounding on each other, or do they disperse and try to take the different objectives? Also, you'll notice there's different defense dice symbols here. So what we're going to do is we're going to set these 3. So maybe that player would set these 3. So we're going to go ahead and set these 3 to the active side. And at the start of each player's turn, they're going to roll a die and say, oh, boom, it showed up that way. That means this one is now going to be the bonus objective. And we'll go ahead and mark that. Boom, it's a bonus objective. It's now worth 2 points instead of just the 1. And so like that's you know, it's a great way to kind of pick up the pace. And once this starts happening, the game is going to go a lot faster. Once that second struggle is complete, if the other player won this one and you have to go to a turn 3, you'll do this, and then boom, you've got a whole nother one, and these are a different layout, and so this will change things up even more. And again, there's 3 different cards for the tier 3, there's 3 different cards for the tier 2, there's 3 different cards for the tier 1. So every game is going to have a different pattern and different layout. Plus you're going to build your terrain and boards and units and everything differently each time you play. And that is basically how you play Star Wars Shatterpoint. It's definitely a objective-driven game that is all about controlling these objectives and more about area location, more so than just about bonking each other on the heads, although you get to do plenty of that as well. If you like what you see here, there's plenty more Star Wars tabletop gaming coverage, a lot more Star Wars Shatterpoint. Be sure to stick around. I want to thank you all so much for watching. May the Force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Big thanks to my patrons as well. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. May you have a wonderful day. Cowabunga, party on, dude. Nunchucks forever. And always wash your socks. Have a great day. See ya.